if you have different parts of your company managing different kinds of risks and they're all interacting with your suppliers kind of separately, then you're going to have one of these data breaches. It's absolutely going to happen because you have so many suppliers now that some of them are going to fall through the cracks.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast, where we explore critical trends and strategies shaping risk, security, and leadership today. I'm your host, Boris Agranovich, founder and CEO at Global Risk Community, and our guest today is Eric Hensley, CTO and CSO at Aravo, which is delivering third-party risk and resilience solutions powered by intelligent automation. Eric, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks. So, Eric, today I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of building third-party risk management programs that are designed for today's dynamic cloud-based interconnected tech stack rather than years ago when systems were simpler. But before that, Eric, could you tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys at Aravo are up to these days?
Absolutely. So my name is Eric Hensley. I'm the CTO and CSO of Aravo. As you mentioned, Aravo, we make software for third-party risk management, performance management, resiliency. I've worked in supply chain management software basically my entire career since 1999. It's always been interesting, as an area of enterprise software that has varied and constantly changing challenges. And I've been the CTO at Aravo since 2008, working specifically on third-party risk, fourth-party risk, and just watching that risk profile and those surfaces and just the valence of it change over that now almost 20 years.
Fantastic. So let's discuss, dive deeper into the topic, because recent breaches at companies like Air France, KLM, Allianz Life Insurance, and Adidas were all linked to third parties. And why does this indirect relationships remain such common entry point for attackers? And why do so many organizations still underestimate that risk?
Two good questions there. First, why does this keep happening, or why does it seem to be happening more? There's several reasons for it. The main reason is just the fact that more data is being sent to third parties all the time. There's more and more and more, we used to call it outsourcing. Now it's just part of business. So if more data is at third parties and they're doing more for you, then the likelihood of this sort of thing is going to go up. And then to answer the second part of your question, why is this different than in the past? And there's a variety of reasons for it that I see. The main one is that there's a sort of skew, right? There's still a disconnect between the various risk management functions inside companies, and a lot of companies still aren't really thinking about their suppliers and their supply chain as this kind of risk vector. They're thinking of them either as suppliers of certain kinds of business or some sort of company outside of your own company that maybe needs to be occasionally assessed for their performance or risk or something like that in a very disconnected way.
So, in continuation, why do traditional IT risk assessments fall short in uncovering such vulnerabilities across tech stack, and especially when it comes to third and even fourth parties, as you mentioned?
It's a good question. I spent a long time as an IT risk guy myself, right? And there's a particular way that you thought about risk management in your company. Third-party risk was one of the first, in IT, was one of the first areas that companies started worrying about it, but they started worrying about it in a particular way, right? What data, right, is a particular third party holding? What's the classification of that data? And what's the process that I go through internally, usually that I would go through internally, in order to provide a perimeter, right, so that I can limit the risk of that. And that, if you have one third party or five third parties, that have particular kinds of data, then that process will work. If you have even a small company like Aravo, if you have 50, right, or large companies have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, that process just doesn't work. It was created for assessing the risk of internal systems and a small number of external sort of vendors. And it has a tendency to miss a lot of the risk. In the Air France, Allianz, and Adidas recent breaches, one interesting thing about them is that they were all from CRM providers for those companies. And it's like if you're an IT guy, you're thinking, oh, a CRM provider. That's, they're working support cases or, they have our customers' information in it, but it's not really my critical data that my business is about. And so it creates blind spots like this. And there are other people in the business who have that blind spot, but they get siloed.
Mhm. So let's discuss about because many organizations struggle to clearly define ownership of third-party risk across IT and security and the pure procurement, different silos organizations. So how can leaders align these functions to ensure accountability and effective risk management?
Yeah, absolutely. This goes to how you are viewing your third parties and sometimes even their third parties, your fourth parties inside of your business. Are you viewing you as a corporate culture, right, at the highest levels of leadership? Are you viewing your supply chain as external companies that maybe help you with a thing, right? Which is how it was in the past, or are you viewing your supply chain as essentially responsible for large parts of your business, and a series of partners and an extended enterprise without whom, or if they have problems, you are going to have significant problems, right? Your business is going to become significantly impacted. Companies still thinking about their supply chain in the former tend to be siloed because there's no one who is taking this view that, what, our supply chain is a critical part of our business, as critical as whatever we are doing in our core business. If we're refining titanium, right, and I have a CRM provider for holding data about my customers, that provider is as important as my titanium refiners. It's hard to get to that level of integrated thinking, because particularly at larger companies, no one is really doing it. And so I find that companies that have either chief risk officers or chief information security officers, or sometimes even heads of procurement who are thinking holistically like this, tend to have far fewer of these problems, not because they're necessarily mandating lots of risk management for their IT departments, but because everybody is aware of the risks and then they will figure out their best practices themselves.
Mhm. Fantastic. So, what does a third-party risk management program designed for today's tech ecosystem look like, and how does it differ from the programs built for simpler IT systems years ago?
Yeah, a lot of this is about scale and breadth. And the reason that you need scale and breadth is because of this sort of integration between functions that I mentioned in the answer to the last question. If you are going to consider tens, hundreds, thousands, or sometimes even millions of separate external companies as critical to your business, right? And not just someone who does a thing for me, a pencil supplier, is the joke one that I always talk about, right? If you're going to consider them all as critical to your business, then you need to have a set of third-party risk management processes that scales to that challenge. The traditional methodologies, they don't scale very well, particularly in IT due diligence. The traditional methodologies are very point in time, they're very assessment based, and they're very manual. And the reason is because the history of IT due diligence is very controls framework based. And it's also very black and white because that's how we IT guys think about things, right? Either you're right about something or you're wrong. And so a situation where you're assessing a third party based on a controls framework and you are saying, oh, you're looking good on 122 of our controls, and on 10 of our controls, you need to have a corrective action. We have issues with that, and we're going to give you 6 months or a year, and we're going to assign, priorities to all of those. And once you get past all those, we're good. Is a very old-fashioned way of thinking about this. It actually can work, If you have five important suppliers, if you have 10,000 important suppliers, then what's going to happen is you're going to decide which are the five important ones, and you're going to do that. And then you're going to do very little or nothing for the rest. And that's when you're going to say, you know what, our CRM provider, not that big of a deal. We're going to do a lower level of due diligence on them, not really even intentionally, but just because the way we think about them doesn't scale right. And so, as a follow on, you can talk about what you might do instead. Is that, is that should I talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you can explore further.
Okay, great. So an integrated risk management process. First of all, the first thing that you will do is you will realize that large parts of your supply chain are now critical to your business. And you have to drive that realization across your IT people, across your finance people, across your legal people, across your procurement people, and ideally with some kind of integrated risk management stance across all of those things, and then drive awareness for that to the board level. Once you've done that, at companies, it tends to become fairly apparent, what they have to do here, right? We need a process or a set of processes that scales to essentially everyone in our supply chain, right? If our pencil manufacturer, right, has all kinds of information about who's getting the pencils, and they do now, right, and that gets breached, that's potentially just as bad as if our internal manufacturing system gets breached because it's the same data, right? You've given this data to these people. And so you will end up with a process that leverages enormous amounts of automation, that leverages modern systems that are exception based rather than assessment based, right? So that, automation is monitoring could be still based on your controls frameworks, could be still based on best practices or whatever risk management, stance you've decided is appropriate for your supply chain. But you will put in place a system that leverages automation so that you can manage your supply chain, the risk of your supply chain by exception, rather than having to constantly manually monitor everything, because you just won't, right? Even if you have good automation, if it's based on constant manual monitoring of everything, what are you going to do? People talk about third party, let's go get risk intelligence data. Risk intelligence data is great, but if you don't tie it to reasonable automation, ideally now using AI, then it's going to make your problem worse, actually, rather than better, because you're going to have a fire hose of information. And no, I have a manual process for reviewing it all. What am I going to do with all that? Right. So it's a lot of systematic scaling that you glue together, but the real answer is realizing that you must manage the risk of your supply chain at scale, because your supply chain almost certainly exists at scale unless you're a truly tiny, tiny, tiny company. And that's the big difference.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, great explanation. So yeah, well, I will explain, we will discuss more about automation because with the rising of this agentic AI, maybe there is a new kind of twist in this
Hmm.
automation. But I would
Oh,
like
certainly.
to first ask you a personal point of view. What is the major misconception in the third-party risk management space that you kind of strongly disagree with?
The major misconception in the third party risk space, particularly in the IT risk space, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about today. We're talking about
Yeah.
data breaches, is that the perimeter model of security, right? I have an inside, tightly guarded, you know, VPN protected, multi-factored place where I can put data, is a viable model for applying to all of your third parties that are out there. And I'm seeing a lot of talk about this because we keep having a lot of data breaches, and people saying, well, that's because they weren't inside of our perimeter, right? As long if we could apply a perimeter type model like we used to this problem, then this problem would be lessened. And I strongly disagree with that. It has a strong feeling of let's just go back to how it used to be, which is like CISOs. They often like as one myself, it's like right, like this is complicated and I have to deal with it, right? And I had a methodology that worked in the past, and so this is one where it's just not going to work. The perimeter model of security is not coming back. more data are going outside of the walls of your company, and you need to have a security strategy that scales to meet that challenge. And the way that you do that is by working more with the rest of the people in your company and not less.
Mhm. All right. So, looking ahead, what imagined challenges or changes do you see shaping third-party risk or cyber risk management in the next few years, and how should the organization prepare now? I know we will talk about AI or
Mhm.
something like this, but maybe
Yeah,
it's
in the
up to
future.
you what you decide major trends.
Yeah, absolutely. Major trends are going to be mostly what I'm talking about here: more automation and scale, more use of systems that are exception based, and more motion of very not necessarily manual, but I would rather describe them as rigid and siloed processes being re-engineered and placed into automated systems. You don't necessarily need to use AI to do this sort of thing. There's all kinds of ways to take your business processes and add automation, add exception-based processing to them, and scale. Right, like the entire enterprise software industry has been doing this for like 30 years now. Right, it's been my whole career. And so the third-party risk management and third-party management in general is still pretty early in the adoption curve for this. Large companies are thinking about it. Large companies with very big risk profiles are definitely thinking about it. But I'm still seeing lots of companies they have automation for doing this, but they're taking essentially a manual process and they're moving it into automation unchanged, right? And so, okay, you get a little bit of scale benefit out of that and you get a little bit of visibility benefit out of that, but you almost always remain siloed, right? Oh, the IT department, they're going to still do their own thing, right? My anti-bribery, risk managers are still going to do their own thing. They all have automation, right? And that's going to cause things like, oh, who which of those owns our CRM provider, to fall through the cracks. So the big trend is going to be more unification of supply chain risk management, more movement of that into automation that allows you to scale. AI is going to help with that without question, right? And it's going to allow us to automate parts of the process that have been difficult to automate. But really, I think of it as just more, right? And if you're already way over here on the adoption curve, AI is definitely going to help you get more. But I think a lot of companies are either here or sort of in the middle still, because they're still viewing their suppliers as a company outside of my own that does something for us.
Mhm. All right. All right. Interesting. So, if we summarize our interview for someone who is listening and would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would that
Mhm.
be?
Number one, if you have different parts of your company managing different kinds of risks and they're all interacting with your suppliers kind of separately, then you're going to have one of these data breaches. It's absolutely going to happen because you have so many suppliers now that some of them are going to fall through the cracks. So if you're worried about that, be the person who goes around and says, what are you doing from the point of view of risk management IT department? What are you doing from the point of view of risk management for our third parties legal department? What are you doing procurement department? Let's think about where we can align these and change our thinking about the entirety of our supply chain so that we don't have problems that fall through the cracks, so that we can go get budget together, so that we can put in automation that serves us all, right? And so that we can raise the profile and status of this in our business and avoid these kinds of problems.
Fantastic. So, maybe one more question about a little bit drilling to the next level. For example, if we take a life of average risk and compliance manager, if there is one thing that they should start to prioritize right now that they are not doing currently, what would it be?
They should take a look across the entirety of their supply chain and they should say, everybody in my supply chain is important. Who is out there and who is managing the risks of all of these suppliers? Are there 1,000? Are there 1,500? Are there 2,000? Maybe use AI to categorize them, for example, right? Just get a sense of where do I have silos and who should I talk to eliminate them. Just do that as a project.
All right. That's great. So these were all my questions, Eric. And if I forgot to ask you something that is important to our audience, and you would like to add something, please go ahead.
Oh no, this topic that we were on today is this is one of my big topics, right? Because I constantly see companies who they have good risk management programs. They're solid, right? They're doing well, but they're thinking about their supply chain wrong. And so those programs, they just aren't very effective. And then, oh, I got breached by a third party because that third party just we didn't even assess them. We didn't know what data they had, stuff like that, right? And so just this holistic view, getting out of silos. That's my whole thing. So that's it. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. So, Eric, thanks again. I wish you a great success and success to your company, Aravo, and probably, hopefully, we can do another episode with some of you guys in the future from maybe on a specific topic, other
Absolutely.
specific topic.
Happy to dig into any of these things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Here's thanks.